Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Trans Joycast. I am your host, Kieran, he, him pronouns.
I'm Adam, he, him pronouns.
I'm Ollie, they, he pronouns.
Oh, what's this? We have a new name.
It me.
It you. Welcome, Ollie, to the Trans Joycast. This is our third board member, and he hails to us today from, are you in Las Vegas?
I am. Mm-hmm.
Traveling for work. We are so excited to have you on here. We've been chomping at the bit to get Ollie in all their glory onto this podcast with us because Ollie, among a number of other skill sets and talents, is a fantastic storyteller, is a writer.
Thank you.
And is just a real joy to be around. So we're excited to have them on.
Thank you. I'm very excited.
We're excited to have them on the team.
Oh, yeah, that too.
Yeah.
Also,
we'll keep you around.
I suppose. There was a whole vote and everything.
That makes it sound, it's just you and me.
I know. The whole vote was Adam and I.
All in favor.
For whatever it's worth, it was unanimous.
Hey, you know what? You got to start somewhere. Here we are.
True. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, in any case, Ollie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I was born in Indiana, not probably super far from where Adam spent part of his past.
Less than half an hour from where I grew up.
Yeah. And then I never really lived there, though. I grew up down here in the metro Atlanta area. I was in Catholic grade school for majority of my life in an all-girls format of that from like 3rd through 7th grade. And then after that, a more normal co-ed situation. And then, let's see, I came out as gay to my parent, folks in my life, probably like late high school, early college. And then went to college at Georgia Tech, go Jackets. And
already creating division amongst our listeners, I have a feeling.
Yeah.
Oh, not at all.
I feel like the last 5 years have been probably like the most exciting or meaningful maybe years to me, because I think part of what I felt as I was growing up was that I was always looking for myself, sort of, and I never really felt like I had a really strong sense of identity. And then in 2019, I kind of had this moment of awakening where I was like, I'm what all the choices I've made that I'm in right now, I'm not happy. I need to do something different. So I made the tough decision at the time to split with the partner I had been with for a couple years, which was hard. And then kind of really started over. That's when I joined the football league, flag football, and I made some friends there, which was really, really important and good for me. And, COVID happened. But since then, like 25 to 30 for me was a lot of growth and introspection and healing and stuff. So I want to say it was 2023-ish was around the time where I really started leaning into identifying as non-binary and trans as a relationship to that. It's shocking to me a little bit how much more myself I feel since figuring all of that out. And so it's been filled with a lot more joy and just grounded feeling the last couple of years.
Heck yeah.
And you guys have been a big part of that. So thank you.
No.
Good.
No. It's very mutual, my friend. It's funny because I think what you were describing is time-wise is similar. I think we were on parallel paths in those last 5 years, probably. What you described, I was like, oh yeah, that's very relatable. Same. Same. Very formative the last 5 years for sure.
One other fun fact that I feel strongly about in terms of just me growing into who I am now, I did get diagnosed with ADHD at some point in there, I think a year or so before maybe kind of coming out as non-binary. And I think that did a lot also in terms of my understanding of myself and really getting to know how I operate. And that helped a lot. And I know there's a lot of intersection between queer and ADHD folks. So I'm always happy to chat about that too.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I think there's quite a bit of intersectionality around neurodivergence in general. Like my partner Sal describes themselves as neurospicy. And it's interesting. I kind of wonder if it's that in this journey of finding ourselves and really understanding ourselves, these are things that we stumble upon knowing about ourselves in that process. Just as a human species, I'm not sure if we are actually any more, quote, susceptible.
Exactly. It's just another lucky thing about being trans, being part of this community. We spend so much time and effort really understanding ourselves that by the time we get to stand on this side of it, we know more and are able to relate to other humans in a way that most people can't.
Man, so true.
I feel like we seem to do a lot of work around emotional intelligence as part of both of those journeys, and it helps a lot.
I mean, it's imperative. It's an imperative part of that journey. We wouldn't make it to the other side without it.
Yeah, one of the things that I have known about, or that I've said a lot about myself and about our community, is that maybe one of the biggest gifts we get is that we know ourselves better than most people do. Not because we're more capable of knowing ourselves than anybody else, but just because of what it takes for us to get to a point where we can come out, where we can change everything about our lives, essentially, where we can
learn to accept ourselves.
Right.
I think for me, at least, like the beginning parts of all that is still wrapped up in all the turmoil. It's the slow growth into being able to actually stand up tall as myself.
Yeah, it's true. My experience, maybe this will resonate with the two of you, was that as I was coming out, I had a lot of anxiety about what would be true about that experience, about what bad things would be true about that experience. I also had some assumptions about, I never was at a point where I was like, well, and now I have learned everything there is to know about myself and about life, and I am now at the top of the mountain. That wasn't the assumption. However, I just didn't have a way of knowing how much more I was going to grow and learn at that point.
The mountain's so tall.
The mountain's so tall.
Going.
Right. And there's like, and some days there's like the fog that hangs, or the clouds that hang over it. And you're like, oh, the top must be right there. Oh my goodness. That was fake news.
No, but you never get there.
Right. Yeah. And
you don't want to get there, really.
The beauty of this journey is that the stuff that I've learned, and I'm excited to talk more about our football experience together. I think that'll really tie nicely into some of the things going on in the real world today. Mm-hmm. The ability or the opportunity to continue to learn so much more about yourself in the context of life and the things that are reflected back at you is immense. And you don't get that chance until you actually start to live that true life of yours, that honest life of yours. So lots to talk about there. Really excited about it. Anyway, Ollie, yay. So glad that you're with us. Ollie's going to be here periodically. There's no particularly set schedule, but we want to make sure that there's an opportunity for folks here to connect with another one of our amazing members of Trans Joy. So today's news, well, I guess it's recent news.
Recent news.
So the moon is
almost full.
The moon is almost full.
Which I don't know. I had a nice little sit and was watching the moon, and I was thinking about when the inauguration happened, it was almost a sliver, right? It was almost nothing, and now it's almost full, which kind of gave me a little, maybe?
The rumors about you being a werewolf are not going to be helped by this.
I am a very furry.
He is a fuzzy boy. He is a fuzzy boy.
I am a fuzzy boy. But I am not a werewolf yet.
That's just what somebody who is a werewolf, who doesn't want people to know that they're a werewolf, would say.
True. I guess we've never known.
Saying. Actually, it is not the business of this podcast to out anybody. So that was my mistake. Anyway. Yep. Recent news. I think it's all going well. Everything's going really well. One of the things that we wanted to talk about tonight is the move to disallow trans folks from playing sports, very specifically trans women from playing on women's sports teams. There was an executive order signed about that a couple days ago. And I think it's just like every other thing that's moving quickly right now, especially for the trans community at the moment. It's a worthy topic of conversation. I think there's a lot that the three of us can contribute to that conversation, even though we are on the trans mask side of things. There's opportunity for us to call out the numerous problematic
hypocrisy.
I mean, yeah, we could start with that word and continue forward. Yeah, even though I think it's important that we recognize that the three of us are trans mask, there is not a trans femme voice in this particular conversation. We want to, one, note that out loud, and two, be able to share as folks who grew up in women's spaces as female-bodied individuals and playing women's sports. I think that we all have something to add to the conversation. So, as we were saying before, the way the three of us had met is through our local flag football league. It's the NFFLA here, National Flag Football League of Atlanta.
There's too many F's for some reason. I never understand why, but yes.
It's hard for those of us who are
dyslexic.
Two of the three of us.
we had to spell ULR to each other because we couldn't read it earlier.
He means URL.
What did I say?
I gathered. I knew what you meant.
Listen, it takes a village.
Village.
The F thing is confusing too because the Atlanta chapter is NFFLA, but the national network is NGFFL. So I don't know why they decided to do that to make it extra confusing, but that's what
they weren't thinking of Adam and I can tell you that much.
We were not considered.
Nobody asked me how they should not spell it. Yeah, I'm glad that you called it out, Ollie, because I was never going to be able to. I can never get the national organization's letters in the correct order. The NFFLA is a space where folks, the organization in Atlanta has been around for 20 plus years at this point. And it was originally founded as a space for gay men to play. And they needed a place to call their own, to be athletic and enjoy each other and get out in the sun and run around and play this really fun sport. And so they ultimately founded the NFFLA. Well, 20 odd years later, folks like Ollie, Adam, and I have a place to go play because the NFFLA has worked really hard to create a space where trans folks are welcome in the league as well. And so that's where we met. Mm-hmm. We've played on, I don't think I've ever been on either of your teams other than Adam. I was on your travel team, mm-hmm. but none of us have been on the same team, but we play against each other, which is really fun, and became friends there. I know that I could put out a whole 2-hour podcast about this if I wanted, but the primary thing that I take from being able to participate in a space like that is that I get to be myself and use this body in an athletic space in a way that I never was able to as a kid.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting though that it's worth noting that trans-friendly space is only 2 years old, right?
Yeah.
It's still we're on the cusp of being able to present and be ourselves in these spaces, and
right.
those are the kinds of things that are rolling back.
Right. Something that I really like about the NFFLA and the way that they've gone about it is, look, nobody's written a book on how to create a space like this for folks. There's no manual. There's you really are taking a chance and hoping that you're setting something up that is welcoming, that is going to be good for everybody, that feels like a space that folks can show up in. And there's risk in that. You're taking a chance. The folks that went out on a limb and said, no, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, they must have known that it was going to be difficult and that it was not going to be an exercise of looking for perfection, because if that had been the case, you don't when would you ever kick it off? Because the way that you figure out how to get the space going and to make it what it needs to be is you create it. You just make it, and then you keep your ears open, your eyes open, and learn how to continue making it better as you go.
Yeah, I can get behind that. For me, I think I played a lot of sports as a child, and there weren't women's sports for me to play. So I played with the boys. I played with the boys from a very young age. I was one of 2 female athletes on our travel soccer team, and most of my trauma around playing sports comes from that, and it's from parents. It's from being bullied and yelled at, and from adults that were supposed to be looking out for me in a situation where we're there to grow and learn how to play as a team. And that's what we're taking away from young people, whether it's trans people that you're saying don't deserve to play, or it's those other children who don't get the chance to know a trans kid. It goes both ways. And we're ripping that away from just people. I eventually grew up, obviously. But in the process of that, I had a scholarship to play college athletics, Division I college athletics. And I'm sure that, I mean, I transitioned early in life anyway, but I would imagine that I would have transitioned a lot earlier had I not had that athletics to claim onto that I needed to stay female for. And all of those, like, I don't know, all of those things factor into these conversations on sports. And I think that so much of it forgets that we're talking about children, and that children's sports aren't meant to be gold medals. And they're just meant to be learning how to interact as a community and as a team.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. What would you say about being able to play in a space now as a trans man, as an out trans man?
I think, like you said, we all met playing flag football. Well, we didn't meet playing flag football, but we played flag football together. And so that's within the last 2 years that we started doing that. That means I was already 20 years into a transition, and to go and be in they called it, now they call it the WTNB, Women Trans Non-Binary. So if I'm standing on a field in a space that's called Women Trans Non-Binary in a full beard and my hairy ass self, I'm obviously a trans man.
Well, it was when we started playing, it was called Women's Plus.
It was called Women's Plus, and it was very difficult. And there were only 3 of us. There were very few trans non-binary members at that point.
3 trans men, or a few more non-binary folks.
Again, we're a very small community. Very small.
If you want to play football, let us know.
Yeah, come on out. But yeah, it was really stressful for me, even me, to stand on that field, but being there and standing on that field and watching my fellow teammates, and especially my trans siblings, like seeing their nervousness, seeing people still nervous to change their shirt with a binder on. And then to me, it kind of snapped in my brain and went, no, this is where you need to stand up. This is where you walk around without a shirt on. This is where you be confident. And that's for me, obviously, because it helps me to reclaim myself, because a lot of that was stolen from us as trans people. But it's also about, like, that's the beginning of trans joy in a lot of ways, to be able to see the power in seeing each other and playing athletics with each other and just being together and intensely knowing other trans individuals, which my life hadn't been filled with up to that point. And it's hard to have any pride in myself if I don't know my community. So there's a lot of power in running in the somatic part of athletics that allow, especially football. There's some aggression in there on purpose, right? Like sometimes we need a little shove, to kind of work some shit out.
Yeah. Ollie, how about you? What was your kind of sporting background?
I also played some sports over the course of, I was like a serial sports adventurer. I played like
You're
one
just a
season.
serial adventurer in general,
I would
right?
agree.
Well, yeah. I have like 47 hobbies.
Ollie was knitting
Yeah.
while we were having our meeting on Saturday.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
new hobby.
Yeah. I started, I think, in softball. I did that for like 2 seasons. I did 2 seasons of soccer. And then I did lacrosse for a couple of years. Then I quit to do theater. And part of the thing I wanted to mention about this too is, Adam, when you were talking about how it feels like in some ways parents are sort of missing the point of children's sports, I feel like particularly growing up in the South too, there is a palpable imbalance of this like glorification of sports and a deprioritization of arts. So while there were like opportunities for both while I was in school, it felt very much like culturally everyone was much more pushing sports. And this was even at an all-girls school, even at a Catholic school. Like I went to a very small school, obviously, so we didn't have maybe quite as many options for different things, but I was a serial sportist. And at the same time, I had this passion for writing and arts that never seemed like it. There were opportunities there, but they're just, I don't know. It's interesting that I feel like I have passion for both, and only one, I think, really did I sort of try to stick with in 18 different forms. But
now you have both of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Like
now I do,
that's
yeah.
part
and
of
I feel
learning who we are, right?
Right. Lacrosse, cross country, rugby, boxing,
lacrosse stitch. No, nobody. Okay.
What did you say?
Hey, you made
Lacrosse
yourself
what?
laugh.
I said lacrosse stitch.
And
I got
rightfully,
it.
no one responded. It's okay. We love you.
You know, my life mantra is you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's true. I appreciate the pun now.
You're very affirming. Thank you.
Let's see, where was I going?
I'm sorry. Wait, you boxed?
Oh, yeah. Well,
Played
like
rugby.
sometimes the rugby in me comes out when I'm playing football and I get flagged for it.
We've seen it.
But actually, no, interestingly though, that was a great, like rugby was probably, yeah. So rugby and boxing happened together the sophomore year I was in college. And I was just, like I went to my very first Pride meeting back when Pride was like 10 people at Georgia Tech. At the time, I ended up playing rugby, I think, because I found out it was kind of a queer affirming space. And so that was really the beginning of me seeing like a welcoming sport. Because prior to that, all of my sports that I had played were part of a Catholic school. You know, the queer people that we had it was just, like, we didn't talk about it. But in college, it was really, really interesting. And it kind of felt like I was in middle school again because I had to figure out how to interact with people like you just described, like being yourself and playing a sport. I was newly out and I didn't know, I was a mess. It was,
Oh, we understand.
but yeah.
Who of us
And then,
wasn't?
but so at the same time, in the same semester, the college had offered intro to boxing. And then if you did that, the next semester you could do advanced boxing and you get to spar and stuff. I was the only girl that did that. And that was really interesting because the instructor was kind of sexist. He gave me these pink hand wraps and gave special rules to where the like guys couldn't take headshots at me and stuff, which they ignored when he wasn't looking. But I got so much out of that too because it just and for both of these, like I think for me and Adam, you were talking about anger. I'm an Enneagram 9. I grew up in a Catholic school and like just a bunch of things about my childhood. I was never like that. I just refused to accept the fact that I was allowed to feel sadness or anger like ever. Well, sadness sometimes, but anger especially, no. And so boxing was interesting because I got clocked in the face by a dude and I was like, my body's reaction of just all the things. It was like, I wanted to cry, but I was mad. And like, it was a lot of stuff. And just learning what it was, I don't know, it was just such a fascinating experience. And then on top of that too, like for rugby, they just tackle people on the ground. You're not wearing any pads. You just go out there and do it. And I was that kid actually when I was younger that was afraid of contact sports. I was running away from all the people in soccer because I didn't want to get hit. And then something happened when I got to college, maybe because I finally was accepting that there was some anger there. And then I was like, oh, this is, I like
why
this.
people play sports.
Yeah. And so I I think that one of the coolest things about myself that I learned when I joined the NFFLA, I mean, I learned so much about myself, and why would we want to take that away from kids? There's so many different lessons to be learned from sports. I didn't know how to play football when I joined. So they were like, okay, you're just going to rush because then you just have one job. But it turns out that works for me, because sometimes football is like super overstimulating. There's too many things to remember. My little squirrel brain can't do it. So I'm like, just give me the one job and I will chase the hell out of, and I learned that I have this like a tenacity of a single point of focus, and just like, I don't know. And similarly too, like with blocking, in the same way that for the other sports, I don't think I ever really knew until I was an adult that was an effective like stress reliever, and a thing that it feels like my body wants to do. It's like it wants to eat.
Yeah, especially doing all those things in the state of hyper awareness that it is to be a trans person. Like to be in that hyper state of awareness and do the athletics is so healing that, I mean, I just didn't know. I also think it's really important to note that it's no different for any child growing up that plays sports and learns these lessons as they get older. I would hope that most sophomores in college are fumbling around figuring themselves out. And if you're not, I'm sorry for your luck, because the other end of that journey is worth it. Is worth it. And that's what we're stealing from, like you said, Ollie, that's what we're stealing from just kids for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah. So I grew up playing mostly soccer. It was an inexpensive endeavor. You just needed your cleats and your shin guards, and I played a lot of co-ed. And as I got older, of course, that turned into playing on women's teams. And I loved playing. I loved the competition. I loved the physicality of it. It wasn't until a lot later in life that I realized that what I also felt in those spaces was a lot of discomfort, because I, now looking back, can recognize, I just really wasn't even a little bit able to be myself in those spaces. I mean, you're in locker rooms with people, you're getting changed on buses. You're very aware of your body when you're engaged in athletics. And it just, and there was a disjointedness there for me already that I, again, now can recognize for what it was. But the whole experience was always a combination of love and discomfort for me. It was a passion for it, and yet not really finding my place in it. And similar to you, Ollie, I also was into the arts. I did a lot of theater. I did backstage theater stuff. I did a lot of music stuff. And those places for me, in a lot of ways, ended up being a little easier because there wasn't the same type of body awareness, I think. And it really, just in this conversation, is when I'm realizing that might have been part of the reason why that felt like a little bit of an easier, safer space for me. And those spaces are all filled with all sorts of different types of people, too. So fast forward to me being in my 40s, I think I started playing with the NFFLA when I was 40 or 41. And in between that youth athletics and now, I started transitioning, and I've got a whole new take on life. I've got a whole new vantage point on myself. I've got a whole new contextualization of myself in spaces that I didn't have before, because again, I wasn't showing up in any space as myself until now, or until I started transitioning. So being in a space where I can use my body, and it's my body now, I feel like it's my body in a way that I did not before. Being able to be on a team as myself, being able to play against other teams as myself, being able to be clear about who I am in that space, the amount of healing that I've done there, and truly the amount of growing up I've done there, because there are things that I didn't have an opportunity to really process, to learn, to experience in a group setting, because I just couldn't show up as me. Now I have the ability to be in those group settings as me, and I'm more open to those personal lessons that are there, because I've cut through all the other layers that prevented me from even getting to that spot. The NFFLA has really given me an opportunity to work on healing that part of myself, and that's an ongoing process for sure. I want to say, like, there's also moments of imperfection there that we absolutely know that change for the NFFLA of really being very forward about being accessible to trans and non-binary community members. It hasn't been an easy change for some people, to be very clear. I don't mean to paint a perfect picture here.
I think that that's something to note for the queer community as a whole.
Yeah.
That a lot of people don't really comprehend. It is rarely a trans-friendly space.
Even queer spaces can be unfriendly to trans community members, which is a whole other conversation that's wild to me. But yeah, so we have our moments in the NFFLA. And the thing that I really appreciate about that space, one of the many things I really appreciate about that space, is that when they started really being intentional about bringing women, bringing trans folks, bringing non-binary folks into the organization, there was no way to know how to do that perfectly. And yet there was an agreement by enough folks that were like, you know what, we need to just go ahead and figure out how to do it. We're just going to do it. We can't just keep waiting and waiting and waiting, because we're never going to get to a place of perfection with it until we go ahead and just start with what we know, and then let our community members help us figure out how to continue to make that better. Because it was a very, very cis space and a very, very cis leadership team that opened it up to trans folks. And so there's so many lessons for me here, one of which is how important it is to have our cis allies helping kick doors down for us. That's a space where there's an example of that. There were absolutely trans non-binary folks in the league, and there certainly was an influence there. And it required our allies to pull the trigger on making that happen for this space. And so the other piece that I was going to mention about it is that, as I said, it's not perfect. No space is perfect. And I will have no problem continuing to give my energy to a space that is always constantly trying to get better and is always influenced by folks who are really, really interested in ensuring that it is a space for everybody. And, that's tough. When you have these spaces that are queer, the entirety of the space is built for queer folks. Everybody is represented there. And so many of us, not just trans folks, but so many of us didn't get to be ourselves growing up. And so this becomes a space where so many of us are learning how to be real life humans in a space that we didn't have an opportunity to do that before. So that it is neat. And there are trying moments in that. And, the beauty of it is that we're all growing together. To both of your points, when we're talking about banning trans girls and trans women from athletics on women's teams, you are not only are you depriving the trans kids and trans adults from those spaces, but the teammates that they would have had also lose out. They don't get to know the amazing people that they would have had on their teams otherwise. They don't get to have the experience of learning empathy for another group of people. To what end? You've got a 6-year-old trans girl and a 6-year-old cis girl, and they just want to play soccer. Why can't they play together? Why can't they be on the same team? So there's an exclamation point put on my opinion on all of this, just based on my own experience today in playing a recreational sport. That is just such a reminder of how silly it is that we would deprive anybody of those spaces.
And how silly it is that they think they can stop trans children from playing athletics in the same way that we have all played athletics. We are all trans children.
Ooh, that's such a good point, Adam. Say it again.
Yeah, all of us were trans children and we all played athletics. And this generation of trans children will continue to play athletics, and they will play in places like the NFFLA, right? They will play in places like the local rec league, the places that make sport available to all children. And those places will be a better place for social community growth than any of your goddamn school football teams. It just will be. And we have to remember that too. All these proclamations, if you will, these executive orders that are coming down from on high, we have to choose to follow through with that. None of this preemptive compliance bullshit. Like all the state schools taking funding, doing better, cutting this, cutting that. No, you get to make the choice to stand up and say, I will not do that. That's illegal.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, shit, the NCAA came out not too long after the executive order was signed and said, actually, we're just going to ban all trans women from playing.
CrossFit did it.
They're allowed to play on practice teams. Like they're just not allowed to compete. Nobody actually said you had to do that, NCAA.
No.
You were just waiting for an excuse
and you took it.
Right.
And that's a crime. That's the crime.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very, very good point. Kind of touching on the way that way that executive orders work is that there are definitely things that executive orders can trigger in the federal space that do get enacted immediately. That includes things like the inability to change your gender marker on your passport. 100% controlled by the federal government, and you cannot make a change to your gender marker. They made that change. Same with Social Security, same with, anything else that is specifically owned by the government. What we see though, and of course this is the goal in a lot of ways of these executive orders, is normalizing the decisions to do these things. What we see is, that executive order around gender markers. We've also seen hospitals starting to turn away and this is real life. There are trans folks who are being turned away from treatment because hospitals are complying in advance.
I was misgendered at the hospital last week. Can we say that? I was misgendered at the hospital last week. There's something wrong with the world.
What I'd like to do is describe Adam for you right now, if you're listening. We were joking about the werewolf thing earlier.
I really am very furry.
He has the most glorious beard. He really does. There's not a thing about him. There's not a thing about his name, not a thing about his face that would ever lead to a situation where, unless somebody saw something in his paperwork, would ever lead him to be misgendered.
I'm at the hospital. It says I had a hysterectomy, right? You're making a choice to then look up, see me, and say, Miss Kaler, right?
Miss Adam Kaler?
Yeah. Oh, Adam. Yeah, Adam Kaler. Sorry, sir. No, you made a choice.
Yeah. In those moments, I've figured out that I really don't have a problem, and this has taken time, but I have no problem correcting somebody in front of a waiting room.
Neither my wife nor I moved at all. We were just like, what?
There must be another Kaler here.
But that's the take home, is that you're normalizing this idea that it's okay to be cruel to other people for no reason whatsoever. And that's preemptive compliance. Yeah. Nobody asked you to do that. Nobody's making you make those bigoted decisions. You're doing it on your own.
One thing that this discussion makes me think about too is a thought that I've had in relation to the discussions around banning topics in classrooms about gender, is that we know that at some point in your kid's life, they're going to come in contact with a trans person because there are trans people in the world. Surprise. But I feel like school is supposed to teach you how to, operate in the world, and sort of sports also as like this container for learning life lessons and such. So what I've never quite understood about that is, why would you want to discourage discussions in the classroom where you're supposed to be learning? Because you're then essentially sending your kid out into the world unprepared for an interaction that they're going to have.
You make such a good point. And I wonder, it just seems like so much of that comes from the fact that the folks making the decisions about the types of things that can and can't be covered, which, by the way, usually aren't teachers. It's not the teachers that are deciding those things typically.
Right. Same way that it's not the doctors.
Right. Right. Because teachers, by and large, are going into work every single day trying to figure out how to prepare students for the real world. And they're working within a system that is trying and does dictate not only what the preparedness of the real world, quote, should be, but what the real world, quote, is. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the folks that are making those decisions are trying to pretend we don't exist. And I chose my words carefully there, because so much of what we're seeing, our community will react by saying, and rightfully so, I would argue, by saying we're being erased. And that is true. And that is not hyperbole. And when we say that, what we mean is that people do not want their kids to know that we exist. People don't want to know themselves that we exist.
That's a really good point. It's people. If you look at the way that those executive orders were written, you can tell that it's a bunch of parents. It's written in such a way as to say that school is making my kid think of me as an enemy and society as an enemy. They're making me feel bad. It's all about me as this whatever fictitious parental figure. But yeah, they're doing it for them. And so it's not even really about us.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I think that the decision makers have decided we don't actually exist. And so our experiences aren't real experiences. So why would you ever teach something that isn't real? I think that's where they're coming from. I think it's gross. I think it's problematic. I don't think it helps the kids or us. Certainly not the kids.
Yeah, the other thing that made me think about too is where's the ownership of parents to talk to their kids at the end of the day and say, hey, this is what you learn in school, and I want you to know that this is what our family believes, but not everyone believes that. And so I just want you to know that, because you know what I mean? Like that, I feel like to me, that's part of raising a kid, is demonstrating those differences, because that's the reality of what's in the world. And so it's almost like they want the schools to teach their beliefs to children instead of giving their kids the information and then you teaching them the belief system at home, which feels like a shirking of responsibilities personally.
I think you nailed it. I think it's a couple of things. I think it's that, one, if you believe that your way of thinking is the way of thinking, is the correct way of thinking, then that's the thing you want taught. And that's why these conversations are so hard. We're not arguing with the open-minded folks who are like, you know what? I don't know that I get it, but also I know that there are to your point, I know there's a lot of different ways to see the world. Those are not typically the folks that we're having to arm wrestle for proof of existence. It's the folks who simply believe that their way of existing and believing is the correct way and that the rest of us are doing it incorrectly. I think it's worth noting that all three of us on this podcast were raised Catholic. And so there's maybe a little bit of a shared perspective here. I know that for me,
a shared trauma.
I
was raised Italian Catholic. We're intense.
It's more of like a Roman. There's probably more shouting in your version is what I'm picturing with the Italian. Loud. Yeah, very loud. Much of mine was like whisper anger. Like, you will not.
But I think that's almost where these people, where the whoever's writing all this stuff, as you've been talking about them, like where that's coming from is that they're so angry that they can't do what you just described, Ollie, is reconvince their children that their way is right when they get home. Because these kids are going to school and they're seeing all these things and they're coming home and going, no, Mom, Dad, you're wrong. Because they are. So their last ditch, I hope, is doing these kinds of things to just outlaw.
That is where the rubber meets the road, right? It's and really a lot of these policies are meant to prevent kids from even learning
exactly good
that they can exist in a different way. And really, it's not even about them learning they can exist in a different way. It's really just, to your point earlier, Ollie, like, this is the world. You know, whoever you are is who you are. This is the world you live in. It's not about convincing anybody that it's right or wrong. It just is. When I was in my Catholic upbringing, I don't know if I was outwardly taught this, but I somehow internalized one way or the other that questioning what I was being told was, quotes, the right way of living, the right way to be faithful to my religion, the right way to pray. I mean, all of that. There was a right way to do those things. And then on the other side of that is that questioning it is a sin. Questioning it is not okay because that means that you don't have faith. And the whole premise, at least my understanding and my upbringing of religious faith is emphasis on faith, which is there are a lot of things that you can't see. There's a lot of things you can't prove or know for sure. And those are the things that you lean on in your faith. It created a situation where I didn't really question things for a very long time because I was afraid to question things. Man, what if I question it and I'm wrong? I'm going to be punished for that. What if I question it and I'm right? That's also scary. Then what is there? Then what is it that I'm supposed to think and believe and do and act and see and behave like? So it took me a long time to get to a point where I was like, this just isn't making sense to me because I just can't understand how we preach love, 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 and then we don't act with love, 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 love. That was ultimately sort of the breakdown for me, is the very basic version of it. And I think that when you have, especially very specifically Christian religious underpinnings in all of the things that are put in motion right now, or at least as far as I can tell, most of the things put in motion right now are coming from a Christian values-based place. I know what those rules were for me. And that's why it's hard to have discussions with folks who believe what they believe, because there's no opportunity, there's no opening for questioning that within themselves. There's the religion of it, and for these purposes, I'm separating out spirituality versus religion. The religion part of it doesn't allow for the space for questioning any of it. And so, gosh, how do you have conversations with folks that...
I mean, you have this simple conversation. Isn't it funny that we all lived through that? We lived in a time where we didn't exist. We weren't taught to people. We didn't know that we could be trans. We had to figure this out for ourselves. We figured it out. We found it. We exist. We figured out how to be ourselves, and we will continue to do that, whether you teach us or not.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking that earlier when you were talking about kids. Have you ever tried telling a kid they can't do something? They are going to go use whatever technology. They're going to just be sharing Netflix passwords at age 18 to watch a queer show so that you don't find out. Like they're going to they're going to figure it out. And especially now, your kids already know because of the internet. So you can blame whoever you want, but if your kid is, figures out who they are.
And to that kid who is figuring out who they are, and maybe your parents believe all this stuff, the community's here for you. Don't forget that the trans community is here for you, and you're not alone.
The other thing that I would want to give to anybody in that situation is that there's also, for every, for your experience, one of us has lived it. We are a small community. There's no question about that. And it's a super, super diverse community. So if you're living in a space right now where you're like, gosh, nobody's going to be able to relate to what I'm experiencing, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised. The community, one of the most beautiful things about it being as small as it is that this community has done a pretty good job of continuing to network itself and continuing to find ways to stay in touch. And when places like Facebook become not the place where we're meeting anymore, we find other places.
Like you said before, we've done it in the past and we'll do it again. We create spaces and make them safe, and they get taken away, and we will create another space and make it safe.
That's right. So, if you're listening and you're like, gosh, that's nothing like my story, that's okay. There's a lot of us out here, and somebody else has a story like yours. Man, we're just waiting for you. Love. What I'm just realizing is that my name on here is Trans Joy Team.
Yeah, I noticed that.
I noticed about halfway through.
But it's fine.
You're the whole team.
I am. What are you all even doing here?
Sweet, I'm going to bed.
Don't leave me. Don't leave me. Please don't leave me. Yeah, gosh. So there's going to be so much more for us to chat through on these things. And it is such an interesting topic because in the same way that there are plenty of folks out there who can't relate to us, there are folks that I can't relate to. And so some of my job, and I think collectively some of our job, at least in this trans joy space, this isn't for necessarily all of our listeners, but for us to be able to continue to keep our minds open, keep our eyes open, keep our hearts open to understanding why some of those beliefs are what they are and why it can be hard to move them so that we can get better at reaching into those spaces and moving them. So with that all said, how about some joy for the week?
Ollie, kick us off.
Hiya.
My joy for the week was after the 4.5 hour plane ride on the way here, we were sitting in the back half of the plane waiting to get off the plane. And there was this little toddler baby child that was just like running up and down the aisle. Just would run a little bit and then come back. His mom was like, "Get back here," but in like a happy way. And he was so excited every time. He was just like, "Freedom!" like with his little feet going down the. And I was like, I feel that way too after being holed up in this seat for 4.5 hours. And he was just so excited to have enough space because the aisle's like this wide, and he's,
that wide, so he fits right.
Exactly. And I love kids, and I love the just sheer joy of running, and like, the simple, pure joy. When I see it in other kids, it always reminds me of that joy in myself too, of just the little fun, weird things in life.
Love that. All right, Adam.
My joy this week is I was at home on Sunday and I got a knock on the door, and one of my neighbors in relative close proximity to me, I guess, I don't know where they live, but she had knocked on my door and said, "This is really weird, but I really have to thank you for keeping your signs out. It means the world to my family." And so we talked. I gave her a hug and told her about Trans Joy, and that's why we do it. While it would be beautiful to convince all of the people that think we don't exist that we do exist, it's for us here at Trans Joy, it's as important, if not more important, to be here and visible for our community so that we know that we are loved and seen. And that was a very good hug.
That's amazing. My joy this week, I'm going to mention two. The first one is one of our staunchest allies, a parent of a friend of ours who their parents have adopted Adam and I and many other wayward trans folks over the years, trans and LGBTQIA folks, had posted one of our Trans Joy signs in the yard. We did a giveaway of Trans Joy yard signs a couple weekends ago. He posted one in his yard. It had been out for all of, 3 days or something. And somebody was walking around in his neighborhood and left a note on it. Let me read it to you because it is honestly super, super sweet. It says, "Thank you so much. Things have started to feel pretty dark, but your sign shined some light and reminded me that there are many good people out there. We're in this together," with a little heart. Signed, the mom of a trans kid in this neighborhood. And for anybody that's looking at this podcast, I'll show you the little sign. It's also on our social media, so take a look at that. That's pretty neat. And then my other joy was us hanging out. We got a chance to just be goofy and hang out at Adam's the other day. We've got a video of a conversation that we had in his backyard. And then we also posted a video with a silly little trend that Adam and I decided we were going to try, and it's the tortilla slap challenge. And I haven't laughed that hard in a really long time. It was super fun.
Adam standing there eating tortillas and being like, "Are we doing it for the youths?" It was such a mood.
Really, it's just like
chewing on a tortilla.
his wife comes over and asks, "What are y'all doing?" And Adam goes, "We're eating tortillas." And I was like, "We're not. We're not. We're not. You're actually eating the weapon."
I thought that was the most wholesome part of the video. That and Kieran, you're like closed mouth cackle that was happening with all the water in your mouth.
I don't want to lose.
You guys hadn't even started slapping each other yet, and I was already laughing.
No.
No, the mistakes were made. The tortillas, I mean, to be fair, the fact that Adam had tortillas, one, wasn't a surprise, but also was a pleasant thing that he had tortillas. We needed them. And
I offered to make bigger tortillas.
You did. And honestly, I would have eaten them. It would have been such a shame to like
right.
use these giant homemade tortillas. You can't see Ollie reenacting the future scene. What's going to happen is, Adam, you are going to make homemade tortillas. We haven't done a 3-way slap challenge, and that is in our future as well.
I am a chemist, so I could probably figure out how to make like the most indestructible tortilla. And you should all have you got to make your own tortilla. I'm making my tortilla.
No,
right. You got to make your own.
I was going to say that. That makes me feel better, because at first I was like, if Adam home makes the tortillas, we can't destroy them. But
he's going to make sure that we can't.
But yeah.
Well, listen,
I feel better now. He was like, challenge accepted.
Right. You know, I was denying this. I'm a woodworker and Sal's a food scientist. I'm pretty sure that Ollie's going to be the one at a disadvantage here.
Yeah.
Although Ollie's squirrely. I can picture Ollie just ducking and running around.
I might also have the physically largest mouth and the biggest teeth, so I might just open my mouth and like eat it instead. I don't know.
Be like what's the character? The not Yoshi, but the pink one. Anybody? Kirby.
Oh, I don't know her name.
It's Kirby.
It's not
right?
Kirby. Wait, with the mouth that looks like this and has like a whole egg can fit in there. That one.
Oh, that's different.
Oh no, you are talking about Kirby.
Yeah,
don't worry about it.
I have so many questions, and I'm uncomfortable.
I'll send you a picture.
That'd be great. So Kirby. Yeah. So in any case, we had these teeny tiny tortillas, and Adam, and they're corn. So if you are a tortilla aficionado, as we are, corn tortillas fall apart a little easier than the flour tortillas, and they were little. And so there's a spot where Adam, I didn't realize this, he doubled up on the tortillas and hit me.
That's what you do, you eat them.
Well, that's what he said. It was brilliant.
Yeah.
I hadn't done it. Adam hit me, and it was like actually getting slapped.
I'm pretty sure you actually hit me before the last one.
I probably did.
I spun all the way
around. You also actually hit me at one point because the tortillas were broken and small, and there was one point literally he had like this 2-inch by 2-inch part of the tortilla left that he tried to hit me with. I think it was all knuckles. It was so much fun. It made me laugh so hard. So check out that video. It's on our social media, and have a good laugh with us because it's silly as hell. And that's who we are. All right. As usual, fantastic conversation with you both. I'm so excited to have Ollie on his first podcast with us, and there will be many more of these to come. Stay tuned. We've got more podcast fun coming your way. And now let's talk about any upcoming events.
We'll still plug Trans Day of Visibility. That's our big one coming up. March 29th with the Atlanta Freedom Bands. We'll have the marching band and the color guard out with us. We haven't quite figured out exactly how to give out location yet, but we will figure that out.
Yep.
But March 29th for sure.
Stay tuned. That's going to be a fun one, and looking forward to seeing you there. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the best way you can help us spread trans joy through this podcast is to subscribe, like, share, review, and comment on any posts that are related to it. Remember to follow us at Transjoy USA on Facebook and Instagram. And for merch, head over to our Etsy shop. There will be a new drop coming here very soon. We're very excited about it. Thank you, as always, to all of our supporters. We still are raising money in the Beacon Fund. If you go to our website, you will find it there on all of our social media. We've got a Linktree link that you can click on that'll take you to all the fun places that we exist on the internet. Thank you so much for your support. We love you all so, so much. Hope you have a great rest of your week, and wishing you nothing but trans joy.
Till next time.
That's a great track that you made, by the way.
Do you think so?
The first time I listened to it, I was like, oh my God.
Thank you so
Did
much.
it.
I did it. Thank you. Wait, I can stop this.